Hi, I'm Angela Clark and I'm with Threadwaggle Quilting. And today we're going to be continuing our journey through learning how to use your quilt path. Last week when we were talking, we had set up a pantograph and we had hit sew in zones. So this week we're going to talk about sewing in zones and what that means in Quilt Path. On our last video, we had set up a design in PowerPanto to put on our quilt. We had set our safe area when we went into PowerPanto, set up our design, and we had gotten as far as hitting sew in zones. When you tap on sew in zones, it is going to ask if you want to save your zone file. You do want to save it, so we're going to say yes. And then I am just going to give it a name. So I'm going to name it video because that's what I'm doing at the moment. And say enter, and then save. And Quilt Path comes in to your placement screen, which is called the quilting interface. Now, what Quilt Path has done in this is Quilt Path has taken as many rows as it can and has sliced them up so that it can put full rows into your zone. So it's going to take the 20 inches that I have on this frame, and it's going to take a percentage of that. We're going to talk a little bit about that next week, but it's going to take a percentage of your 20 inches and say, I can fit X number of rows into that 20 inches. So in this case, it's giving me 2 of the 5-inch rows and also a partial row. And I said 20 inches, but this is a Lenny. It obviously doesn't have that much space. My quiltable space as far as Quilt Path is concerned is 14.71 inches tall. So I'm going to have at least an inch less than that when I go to quilt. So it makes sense that it can only do 2 10-inch row or 2 5-inch rows, which is 10 inches, as opposed to doing, 3 rows, which would be 15 inches and can't fit into 14 inches. So the entire idea about zones is that it's filling up your quiltable area to quilt as much as it can at one time. And that way it quilts faster. So on my big machines that I can fit 20 or 24 inches on, depending on if it's a 30-inch machine or a 26-inch machine, you have to think like an 80-inch long quilt. If you're breaking it up into 20-inch areas, that's only rolling the quilt 3 times, and then the quilt is done. So it makes really big quilts really fast to do. On this little quilt, we have 46 inches roughly long, 15-inch roughly quiltable space. So it's still going to be that, 3 to 4 times that it's going to need to go down the quilt. And Quilt Path is smart enough to know whether or not your design is going to fit into that quiltable space. If it's not going to fit, it will tell you immediately, hey, your row is too big to fit in your zone. Do you want to use something called virtual long arm to cut this up? And the answer for what we're doing right now is no. You would want to go back and make your rows shorter so that you can fit it into one pass of your quiltable space. Virtual long arm is great. When you have something, let's say I have a 40-inch tall block I need to quilt, and it's one pattern. It will cut that pattern up and quilt it like a pantograph. So it is a great feature. You just don't want to be doing that when you're pantograph quilting, because every time it crosses over between the safe area, it would have to meet what has already been quilted. You're more than likely not going to be happy with the results when that happens, because you'll be looking at a much wider surface and more than likely a lot more jumps between the top and the bottom than you would be on that 40-inch block. So there is a way to cut up designs that are too big to fit in your quiltable space, but when you're pantograph quilting, you don't want to play that game. You want to keep it inside your quiltable space. It's okay if it's one row if you're doing a really dense pattern and, you don't want, if let's say I wanted a 12-inch pattern this, I would only be able to get one row at a time, right? That's fine. I can get that one row. It's going to put my next row, the next pass, and everything's going to be beautiful. But like I said, the beauty of sewing in zones, 2 rows at a time when it can, 3, 4 rows at a time when it can. So it just makes quilting very, very quick. So what we're going to be talking about next time is we are going to be going into our zone manager, and I'm going to show you the different features of zone manager. I'll be showing you how you can play with that percentage so that you can tweak how much of your quiltable space you are using at any one time. And we're also going to talk about how placement. We're going to start out by placing this quilt that we're doing right now using something called center placement. But there is a way that you can do 4-point placements and give it the left side or the left and right side. You can also give it the top and bottom of your zone as well. But you're only required in 4-point to give it one point, and that is the top left. Okay, so we're going to talk about all that next time. Once again, I'm Angela Clark. I wanted to explain a little bit about zones to you before we start on doing our quilting. And then next time we're going to talk about how we can manage or control those zones. And then after that, we're actually going to be quilting the quilt. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you're enjoying our content, please like, subscribe, and comment on our videos. And I look forward to seeing you next time.